Hey, thanks so much, Rachel, for coming and having coffee with me this afternoon. And full disclosure to everyone, we're having afternoon coffee. This is my first afternoon conversation. So if I have a weird shadow, this is where we're at, because e-learning goes on in the house. So Rachel and I know each other originally from the Daily Method, which is a bar studio that I still teach at. And basically from the moment my son came out of the womb, he was snuggled by Rachel. And so she kind of helps snuggle him up. And I mean, I think that's one of the reasons, and you'll know as we have these conversations, as we go deeper in this conversation, probably why he's so empathetic. You might have rubbed off on him a little bit.
You God.
That's where we're going to go with it. So the reason that we're talking to Rachel today, other than the fact that I'm obsessed with her, is she just started a business called, I'm going to just say it so I can say it correctly. She's an introspection coach. So it's called Spec Coach. And I'm dying for you to tell everyone about it, because every time she asks me a question, right? So you have to have one of these friends that every time you post something, she comes back with like this deep question of, why is that triggering you? Why do you think that? And you just have to go a little bit deeper. So hopefully we'll go a little bit deeper today. Rachel, thanks for coming. Let's have some coffee.
I'm so giddy to be here with you. I know we chatted already, but now that you're recording, I'm like, oh, I actually am so excited to talk to you.
Well, I'm excited to have you. So tell us all the things. Tell us about introspection coaching.
Yeah. So like you'd said, introspective communication coaching is what I started. And I chose that name because Spec is the root word to see. And I was like, okay, so introspection. I just wanted to get to the root of why there are so many issues with communication. Not that there are issues with communication, like that's a given. It's what are they, and then breaking them down, and then how different they are for every different person. So I'm like, okay, there's too many articles, there's too many resources. I've consumed all of them, every author, everyone ever, from Napoleon Hill and Think and Grow Rich and Win Friends and Influence People, all the way up until the Brene Browns of the world and the Tony Robbins. And there is the same message throughout all these years, but I mean, the loneliness epidemic is a thing. And I did an article last year about how 46% of Americans don't have anyone to talk to and are chronically lonely, and it's getting worse among lower generations and all that. And so I'm like, what gives? And it's because there's a gap between the information and the resources and the implementation. And the gap is the person's subjective experience. So I'm like, okay, we need to go in introspective communication coaching. And so that's where it came from. And then Spec was like just pulling out of the name introspective. But that's like spectacle, spectate, special, introspective, inspect, all of them mean something in regards to seeing something or looking at something. So that's where the name came from. And so that's basically what I do in a nutshell, is I help people to see themselves in different perspectives, see things in different perspectives. I basically coach somebody through the critical thinking that we weren't given tools to do. And that it goes for anything. It's not necessarily just empathy. If you want to get better at empathy, perfect. Break down empathy. What does that mean to you? What are you going to do about it? What are you going to do differently? And then I'll pull on an NLP technique. So NLP is neuro-linguistic programming, which is a body of psychology started in the 70s. That basically goes back into programming and how we use our language to express our inner worlds. And then I'm like, okay, perfect. That's a great place to understand how we understand each other. And applying that to whatever we want to learn. And so that could be empathy, that could be communication skills, vulnerability, anything. So I basically help people to look inside. I guide them through it. I'm basically a tour guide into what you might find, and then using those skills to reinforce what you're learning, because if you've never learned it before, then there's nowhere for it to really land. So that comes into play with introspection and digging deep, and then mindfulness to like clear the space, and then skill implementation to make it part of your life.
So that's amazing. So how did you get to this point? I mean, you don't just start a coaching business, right? I know you read a bunch of books and you've been really introspective on yourself for learning, but how did you connect that dot to get to here?
I've been personally developing since I was 17, and I went to China, and I just saw a little bit of the world outside of my own world. Growing up in New Jersey and not Midwestern, but like East Coast, I was really close to the city. So I've always been exposed to different cultures and things. But then when I went to China, it was kind of like a jolt into how other people live. And so that kind of fundamentally changed me into like, okay, well, I want to be somebody who grows. And so then I went out of my way to do personal development stuff, like Landmark. Highly recommend if anybody's done Landmark or heard of it. Can be a little cultish, but like anything, like there's a way of living that comes out of such a thing that people want to talk about, which is why people are like, oh, you are in a cult, but you don't want to talk about it because you feel changed. So I did that in my early 20s before I even moved to Indianapolis. And then when I moved to Indy, I moved here with not knowing anybody. And I realized basically how manipulative I was to survive, people pleasing. Being liked was more important than the kind of quality relationships that I was making. And then fast forward that, I was like, oh man, I don't like that. And then my job was in real estate. And so that's why I started reading different articles, and like that's what prompted me to be interested in learning how to communicate differently. So, because I was like, oh wow, this is kind of icky. I don't know how to do this in a way that feels good. And then I was in real estate, and I was going to all these cocktail parties, like 2 a month for 5 years. Oh my God. It was just so many cocktail parties. In addition to customer service. And I realized that the things that I was realizing about communication knew no demographic. It was all ethnicities, all ages, all generations. People were staring at their phones and not knowing how to continue conversations, experiencing social anxiety when they were meeting somebody new at these cocktail parties. My own coworkers who worked with me talking about how they didn't want to talk to people. And I'm like, what gives? Why is this such an issue? And obviously tying that into that it was an issue for me, and then seeing that it was an issue for all different types of people, I started the meetup Connect Ed out of that. I was like, wow, this is for, like, everybody kind of wants to learn this that I'm meeting, so why don't I start a meetup? That was not Toastmasters for learning specific skills. It was to talk about a lack of skills, and then what me and those other people as individuals wanted to do about it. It really comes down to like, what are you going to do about it? Like, there's no shortage of resources, and there's no shortage of people that could help you. It's a totally subjective decision. And that's, I think, what some people get stuck in this like paradox paralysis that I was just talking about. I don't even know if that's a real term. I just came up with it because you like know what the right thing to do is, and the doing it is on the other side, and you get like stuck between this rut, which is, I think, the rut that we all talk about when we feel stuck. So I started the meetup, and then the meetup kind of turned into like, wow, a lot of people like this. It has 505 members in 2 years. And I started seeing that a lot of people across generations and age groups and genders and ethnicities and language barriers were not a thing. People really wanted to learn how to improve their conversation and communication skills. So I started Spec, which is the company that I started in the first place.
It's so great. I mean, it's kind of, it makes sense when you say the whole thing. It's really, really great. I love that you took something that I think that's the best part of specifically women entrepreneurs in general, but I'm focusing on women. So that's where we're going to go with this. Sure. Women have that gift, that skill of finding a pain point and fixing a pain point. Or I think sometimes, and I might get hate mail, I don't know, but like men find an idea out there and then kind of build it, where women really focus on how do I make my life and other lives better?
Yeah.
Not just creating this, thing out of the sky, but what is that pain point I can truly fix? And I remember following you on Instagram and just seeing all these really great questions about your meetups and all these things. And again, it might be a Gen X in me. I'm like, I'm still a pick up the phone person. And I know that sets so many people off.
I am too. I love phone calls.
I love phone calls. I
Love-
want to hear your voice. I want to hear the flexion, but
yeah.
I get the whole being in front of people and staring at the ground, and how do I find an exit, and how do I find connection in an authentic way? And that's scary.
Yeah. And so you just said it's scary. What's my thing? If this were a coaching session, I would be, what's scary about it? No judgment. Just say whatever you think is scary. Break down your fear. Don't just say that you have a fear, because we all have that fear objectively. But if you are going to overcome it, you have to find your own tools. And so in order to find the tools, you have to know what the problem is. And, it's like an electrical circuit. Like, none of the things are actually what you think they are. And pulling the box is not just what you do.
Oh my gosh, I love that. For the record, I'm not sharing that on this yet, but you and I will talk offline. We'll talk about my fear.
Yeah, totally. That was just
I'm just kidding. This is about vulnerability. We're going to have an entire vulnerable session when you interview with me for this page. And then I'll probably cry. I'm a crier. We'll see what happens. Okay. So you started a business and had meetups, or I should say you had meetups and then you started a business in a pandemic.
Well, that was so last year. I had worked up until August as a real estate at my real estate company. And then I quit it to do Spec full time. And then I launched it like officially in January. April was supposed to be like my first big $2,000. Spec would have made 50% of its investment back. I was doing lunch and learns. I was connected to tech and architecture and design firms and meeting like their presidents and stuff to go to conferences and have workshops at the conferences about networking more authentically. And creatives kind of have that struggle because they want to go deep, but they might be introverted, but they don't want to talk surface level at first, and they don't know how to overcome small talk. So there's a lot going on. And so I was being like, I was going to get linked up with those conferences. And then April was, everything stopped and I had to shut down my workshops. And that was just it. So I had to pivot, but it slowly, like, I never stopped the meetup, first of all, and I never stopped doing one-on-one coaching. So I've actually had more success in Spec online than I anticipated. I didn't want to do online though. I resisted because I was like, I want to call out your biofeedback. When I'm coaching you, I want to see the blood drain from your face when I tell you, okay, you're going to go have a conversation with the barista right now. And then have them check in with them. So, okay, you're feeling something. I can see it. What's going on? Because if you're controlling that with your awareness, then when you are doing it in your regular life, you'll know what's happening to you. Mm-hmm. Because sometimes when we're like in that social anxiety situation, we don't know what's happening to us, and our like gut is going nuts and our brain's going nuts because our gut's going nuts, and it's all in our brains, but we just don't have the clarity and skills to be like, hey, brain, can you cut it out for a second? I want to have a conversation. I want to connect. Because it's trying to protect you and your limbic system and all that.
I love this so much. I usually try to keep these videos to like 15-ish minutes, but we're just going to roll with it. I'm going to do a lot less editing because it's so fascinating. No, I love it. I think people are going to be really engaged. I think we all have these struggles. Again, whether you're, a Gen Xer or whatever versus, I don't even know what we have right now. Gen Zs.
All of them, Gen Z, the younger.
We all have the same thing. And not just we all have the same thing. We all have the same thing because we're nervous about connecting with each other. Like, I don't want to feel too old, but then I don't want to come across, it's
totally
it doesn't matter. It all interplays. So with all that, and granted, you've had, luck online. Where's the joy coming from in all of this?
Oh my God, this right now. This right now is like pure, like I'm having an adrenaline rush just because this is my joy. Conversation is my joy.
Yes.
And I wrote it down. I was like, okay, conversation when two people learn something, be it about each other, the world, humanity, anything, it doesn't matter. And I in my meetup, there's sometimes a lot of social anxiety can stem from there being pressure and expectation of something happening inside of an interaction. Like, this needs to be a connection. I need to be so funny. I need to say something cool and witty, and I need to know about the subject that somebody else is talking about. And if I don't, then I'm a loser. I don't know how to have a conversation. I got to get the hell out of here, but I don't know how to do that. So what a waste I am. All stemming back to like how we perceive ourselves and our own beliefs, but we won't get into that. So I wrote that down, and I was like, the purest joy is really just talking for the sake of talking, which clearly everybody can see that I can't shut up right now. So
I love that.
So like, this is what I love.
It's so good. So, so right now with, again, with everything going on, you're moving online and, and we're not quite doing face-to-face yet, but you know, what can the community do to show up for you? I mean, are we amplifying your message? We're going to share about Spec. Like, what can we do? What can we do for you? What's your ask?
You're going to hate me for this answer.
Never will I hate you.
The way that people can show up for me is showing up for each other. I know. I was like, ooh, you're going to totally expect it. It really is. Like, Spec is a resource. It's just a resource. If you have difficulty with this, I'm a resource. I'm here to help. I might not fit for everybody, but if I do, great, email me. We'll see if we can work together. But showing up for ourselves, we have such a capacity to heal each other that this conversation could be between anybody, just finding a level of, yes, vulnerability, but vulnerability also stems from comfort. So being able to be comfortable with each other by showing up for each other and Googling, how do I show up for somebody? There's no shortage of that stuff out there. And it's just show up for yourself, show up for each other. And it's not like like those obviously have breakdowns too. What does it look like to show up for yourself? How would you like to be shown up for? How can you do that for someone else to see, like, does that work for this relationship? How I show up for you will be different than how I show up for my friend Jacqueline. Or maybe it's exactly the same and I don't have to worry about it. But it really takes paying attention to how each other shows up for each other. So it's like, start paying attention to the people around you just as they are. Nothing needs to change. Just look, just pause and look and take a deep breath and see what's going on and see how you can show up for your friend, your neighbor. I mean, it's not an I hate oversimplifications because it's so intricate. These things are they're not simple because we are not simple. Our neuro networks and pathways are not simple. And so to oversimplify such a thing just does a disservice to people who might want to improve. And so observing what's going on and starting to pinpoint, like, that's what I like, that's what I don't like, that's what that person likes, that's what that person doesn't like. Here's what I'm capable of doing for this person. I'm not capable of doing that. I need to make sure that that is clear for that person. There are so many different things and ways to just break this down. And I won't say that without offering some sort of tool for it, but people can do a mind map for that kind of thing. So the mind map is my favorite. I do it constantly just because I'm a visual person.
Yeah.
I want to see how complicated I am on any given day at any given time. And that's a tool for empathy as well, to be like, well, that's literally every single person.
I love that.
There's nothing I need to do about like, no, maybe they aren't as complicated as me. Like, no, everyone is this complicated and has that going on, you know?
So now that you don't need, an ask from anyone here, I'm just kidding. But you need us all to do the work. And that might have been a good segue when you were just saying, you know, what you want people to do introspectively anyway. But how does Rachel want to leave? How do you want to leave your trace on Indy?
I want
big question.
People to think that there are options. What I mean by that is there can be a sense, that paradox that like, I know what to do, but I don't know how to do it. I want my trace to be that I was a resource. I want my legacy to be that I left a trail of service, of help, breaking these barriers down between each other, through somebody being able to empathetically look at how complicated their own life is and how complicated the person in front of them's life is. But really, I want to be a walking, talking resource with arms. That's all I want. I want people to engage with me as much as possible if they have questions about this kind of stuff. And it's very important to me that I'm part of the community like that, which is volunteering and making sure that I'm out there. And it's been really difficult. It's been really, really difficult to put these things that I have to say into writing. I should record more videos, but then I have my own things about videos. And I never say what I want to say, what I truly want to say to like the computer by myself. Like, yeah, it never happens. Sitting in a dark room talking about connection. Like, it's not it doesn't feel connected. It's like a very direct tension between what I'm saying and what I'm doing. So I'm honestly, my best work comes from conversations like this, where I'm just like, I don't even know, this is what's going on. So engagement and community, and I want to be a resource. I want people to, after I'm not in Indy anymore, I want my legacy here to have been that I really, really, really put energy into being available to people. That's so good. Yeah. Oh, it's so good. I feel like I could talk to you for like another hour, but I'm going to be very cognizant of time on people. Yeah, also knowing that it's middle of the day, but thank you for sharing. I'm going to put all of your links in this. You know, we'll get it up on the channel, and yeah, I just can't wait to talk again. I feel like we're going to have to do it again because I feel like we just need a longer. It's so good. Yeah, you and I do for sure. We'll get together, you and I. Thank you again. Thank you for for joining me on the Interrepel. I just love what you do. I love that you ask hard questions, and I love that you really put heart into community. And those who don't know Rachel yet, she volunteers all over the place, and I think part of the biggest community work you do is also with Creative Mornings and really hitting a big part of Indianapolis, and and amplifying other voices. So whether it's Creative Mornings or TED or all these things, just grateful for your work. I do volunteer a lot. It's good. It's healthy. It's good to volunteer a lot. Meetup is free, so I could call that a volunteering thing, but it's half an hour every Monday, and it will always be free. So that would be the number one free resource for people to join if they have these issues. I don't like even calling them issues. If they have these tensions with communication, I don't know. I love it. Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you for having this conversation. Thank you. I'm so honored. You are a delight. See you soon.